So chapter 13 is where we start to kind of graduate from statistics into econometrics or applied statistic land. So the first thing we're going to learn about is correlation analysis. This is talking about the relationship between two variables. So it's a group of techniques to measure the relationship between two variables. So we're going to have a graphing technique, right, which is just a scatter plot, but we'll also develop some empirical measures to describe the relationship. So the first tool that we're going to use is a scatter diagram. So a scatter diagram is a graphical tool used to portray the relationship between two variables. So if we have, to use the book's example, we've got different sales representatives, and then we have the number of sales calls, and then we have the number of things that are sold, right? The number of successful sales. And so if we have some information here, right, that, you know, Brian made 96 calls and sold 41 widgets, right? We have Carlos making 40 calls, selling 41. We have Carol making 104, selling 51, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take each one of these points and we're going to put them on this graph. So we're going to label one axis of the graph. So this is where the kind of theory comes in part, right? So we have to ask ourselves, usually we'll be told what the independent variable is and what the dependent variable is. But sometimes we have to kind of ask ourselves it and figure it out, right? So is it the fact that the number of sales calls is likely to drive the number of things that are sold, or is it the fact that the number of things sold are going to drive the number of sales calls? Number of sales calls is likely to drive the number that are sold, right? The effort that you're putting in is likely to drive your results. And so this is our independent variable. And then this is what we would call our dependent variable. And usually an independent variable we will label generally as x. Dependent variable, it'll be y, or sometimes we'll see it as f of x, right? So we're going to have the number sold here, and then we're going to have the number of calls over here. And then we're just going to graph. We're going to say, okay, if this is 100 and if this is 50, then, you know, the first one, 96, 41, somewhere around here. The second one is at 40, 41 right there. The third one is at 104, 51 right over here. And so we're going to do this for all of the different contractors. And what we end up getting is we end up getting something that looks like this. So we see here this kind of loose positive trend, right? And so we can just see visually that sales reps who make more calls tend to sell more copiers. So how do we put a number to this, right? This is how we look at it visually. This is the first technique that we have to measure the relationship between the two variables. It's a graphical technique. We're going to talk about our first numerical technique in a second called the correlation coefficient.